Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us here. My name is Matt Gellner. I'm the Chief Public Affairs Officer at JAX Chamber, and this is the second in our Forward Together webinar series, where we're really looking at different issues that companies and families and employers are facing as we try and work our way through COVID-19. Today, the topic is working with working parents, which is something that's top of mind for everyone right now as schools are looking to some schools have already opened, others are opening in the coming weeks, and then we're really looking at different ways that companies can work with their employees who are parents and try and figure out ways to keep everyone in the workforce and keep business going as we go through this. We have a great panel today with some very knowledgeable experts in the field and a couple of JAX Chamber board members, and we really appreciate you guys making time. So first, I'll introduce our panelists real quick, and then we'll get started. First, we have Donna Orender. She is the CEO of Orender Unlimited and also the founder of Generation W. She's going to be talking a lot about retaining women in the workforce, kind of as a focus of families and how our employers can focus on that. We also have Tim Volpe. Tim is the chairman of Adams and Reese, and he is also the general counsel for JAX Chamber and serves on our board of directors as Donna does. He's going to talk about a variety of issues, including the Families First Coronavirus Response Act and emergency paid leave. We also have Gail Perez. Gail is the senior director of human resources for TECO. She is based in Tampa and started, as she was telling us earlier, started right as the pandemic began. And she's going to share with us some of the ways that TECO is working with families to help everyone through the process, especially as schools are getting ready to get started. So we're going to have presentations and time for questions at the end. So please submit questions in the Q&A portion of the screen on the right-hand side in the panel, and then we will get those to our panelists. So with no one's here to hear me talk, so Donna, I will kick it over to you. Thank you very much.
Matt, I'm here to listen to you talk. Are you kidding? That was so scintillating. Thank you. Hey, everybody. Good afternoon. Appreciate this opportunity to be here at the invitation of our chamber. I'm privileged to be on the board with you, Tim, actually, and spend time with my fellow panelists. Gail, nice to see you. Specifically, as Matt said, I've been asked to speak about retaining women in the workplace, which I'm happy to do, but let me start with a question, if I could. As many of you know, or maybe you don't, as the founder of Generation W, we spend a great deal of time working with women, with girls, and of course and integrating all of that work and building community. So if I were to ask you a question, looking at a more macro focus of where we are, you can write it down or just think about it is, what are the top 3 things that are important in your life? I didn't say your work life, I didn't say this life. In your life, what would it be? Now, I can't hear you, but I will tell you that 90% of the respondees to this question, through a variety of research, says family. Gail, I'm sure top 3 for you, family. Tim, we talked about this, family. Matt, it's our families, right? And you know what's so interesting is the value that we all hold so remarkably clear is directly tied to a better understanding of what we say truly matters and how we behave. And so what I mean by that is if our families are that important, which they are, that importance is not reflected, interestingly enough, in our work life. Not that they're any less important to us as we work, but we have work life, we have family life. And what the pandemic is showing us in so many different ways, aside from taking the cover off all of these inherent inequities that are shining at us, is that living at work and working at home are interconnected. And that is part of the challenge, actually, in terms of retaining women in the workforce in general. The pandemic continues to rage, and we sometimes think, oh my goodness, isn't it great we made it through today? Well, the truth of the matter is, we are grateful, and we should be. But the truth is, every day, every single day, we are tasked with keeping our kids healthy, keeping ourselves healthy, our parents healthy, our teachers, our essential workers. You know, the truth of the matter is we're all in this together, and we truly are. Every day is day one. My mother, I talked to her, my mother's 83 years old, God bless her. I am one of those children who have both children and parents. I am sandwiched, right? She goes, well, my friends are starting to go out. I said, Mom, you don't get credit for the 100 days you've been in the house. You just don't. Today is day one. So let me just give you a little background on where women are today. Women continue to shoulder a disproportionate share of the housework and childcare. This is not news, it's not flash, but a survey conducted this spring by the BCG, Boston Consulting Group, found that on average, women were spending 15 hours more a week on domestic labor than men were. That's a lot of time. Are we complaining? Maybe sometimes. It's what is necessary that needs to be done. Would a greater division of labor help? Absolutely. Women are squeezed between child and elder care. We live in a society where caregiving is seen as a personal responsibility, where women, and the women say, where does the help come from? Interestingly, we're the only industrialized country, the only without a paid family medical leave act, the only. What does that say about our values? Women make up the majority of essential workers in healthcare, 76%, and government and community-based services, 73%. The biggest setback will be felt by Black women, not will, are. Those over 20 saw 14% unemployment just last month. Right, a lot of it for childcare reasons, mid-career at the point where women should be moving into leadership roles, a lot of women are dropping out of the workforce. So long-term, what are we going to see? We're going to continue to see those gaps in leadership pipelines. And the impact on women and our workforce in general has the capacity to be generational in its impact. Our eyes should be wide open here. There are so many impacts by this pandemic. This is one where we can help mediate. So I go back to our original question. What is most important to us? Our families. Our values are bifurcated in a country and a system that speaks to the value of children, the next generation, those we speak up with love and reverence, those who we deserve an equal opportunity. And there's just something missing, right, in the child care aspect of all of this. Because right now, what's happening is women are being asked to choose between their health, the health of their children, the health of their parents, and their job. And you would say, okay, let's give up the job. But women have worked hard to be a vital part of our workforce. So how can we address this? Well, we need to build a culture that aligns with our value, all of our values. We need to think of ROI in a much broader context. And this includes things like this. I took some notes here, so I want to make sure that I can reflect them to you in a coherent fashion. And I want to also give, like recently, we host a show at Generation W called Refresh every Wednesday at noon, where we get experts and have a lot of fun having conversations about these things. And just last week, we had two great human resource professionals, actually, Amy Ruth from Florida Blue and David Emanuel, who's now a consultant but worked at APR Energy. And what I want to hear some of the things we heard, and here are some of the things that we're hearing would be helpful. Number one is that we need to see greater gender equity. We need to see women at the table making decisions that impact them, right? They need to be represented, they need to be respected, and they need to have agency and voice in making policy. All research shows that diversified decision-making processes prove better results. And so therefore, we need all voices at the table to better understand not only the issues, but sometimes if they're not our issues, we don't see them. They're all our issues if they impact our coworkers and our colleagues. Supporting working parents and keeping in mind that the majority of unpaid care work falls to women, among other things, companies are what they're doing now. The pandemic is showing us just how flexible work arrangements can really be productive. Many companies are talking about their productivity. There are many companies that are talking about their lack of productivity or not being as comfortable. A lot of employees are talking about a mix, but at least we're talking about it. It's in the mix, and the ability to be able to have some choices really does impact the ability to retain women. Remember, the other side, we are asked childcare, parent care, house care, all those things are happening in concert. Yes, they are all our issues if they impact our overall ecosystem here, which I believe they do. Now, one other little thing I wanted to throw in, we're talking about companies, is we it would be really helpful to help address the unintended consequences of stay-at-home measures. And this is really sad and frightening because the number of child abuse cases, the alarming increase in domestic violence, again, all of our concerns. And so ways that companies can step in and make sure that there's mental health professionals or programs or referrals, a safe place, because many of us are not in safe places. And that is frightening. And we want to make sure we take care of those women. We don't want to put people in even more of harm's way. One other little piece of this we didn't talk about is the entrepreneurial pool. Did you know that Florida was #3 in the growth of women-owned businesses? We currently have 1.1 million businesses owned by women in our state. It equals to about, I think, over 500,000 employees. That's a lot of employees. And we also know that small businesses have been crushed in many sectors. So I think we should be keeping our eyes open in terms of how we help small businesses, because small businesses also provide a conduit for increasingly talented women employees and entrepreneurs who can have an impact on the public sector. So when I listen to women, which I do often, when we have these conversations, what do we all hear? We hear this. It's not even what yes, maybe I want my life as it was, but it's more about this loss of control. We can't see around the corners. We can't see what's in front of us. We can't control this pandemic. There's no unified conversation about this is how you should act. So you can go places where people act responsibly and others don't. All of that creates a maddening sense of, I don't know how to control this. I do know I want to take care of my kids. I do know I would like to have my job, and I do know that I would like to protect our teachers, but also send my kids back to an optimum learning situation. All of it's incredibly frustrating. My sister called me just the other day. Her daughter's going to college. Tears. What do I do? What about the money? What about the finances? I mean, to have open conversations is one of the best things we can do, to find support in pods, whether it's pods for our kids or pods for us, where we can share information. This is a pod. Thank you, Chamber, for doing this. Ultimately, to be compassionate, to be able to listen and be flexible. Women are having to choose between the health of their children, their family, and their jobs. It's a tough time, and we do not want to roll back the clock. We do not. We have worked so hard to show how vital and how large the contributions women make as part of gender equity and inclusion in the marketplace. And we want to make sure that we can keep it going that way. Companies like Florida Blue are doing just that. And I am sure, Gail, you'll be sharing stories like that from TECO as well. So thank you very much. And I look forward to any and all questions you may have. Tim, I think it's up to you.
Well, thank you, Donna. I appreciate that. I'm a lawyer, and so by definition, what I have to provide to you today is going to be a little more boring than Donna's wonderful presentation. I'd like to talk to you about, I've been asked to talk to you about a wonderful act that was passed by Congress called the Emergency Family First Coronavirus Response Act, which really it consists of two acts: the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act and the Emergency FMLA Expansion Act. If you think of it as two separate acts, it simplifies to some extent this somewhat complex piece of legislation. So the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act is effective from now through December the 31st of 2020, unless it's extended by Congress. This act provides 80 hours or 2 weeks of paid leave for full and part-time employees of companies with less than 500 workers. So these acts, both of them, are much more focused toward small business than they are toward large business. The initial Family and Medical Leave Act that was passed by Congress was much more focused on large employers. In fact, individual offices had to have more than 50 employees for that act to apply. That is not true for these two acts that have been passed by Congress and signed into law. So let's talk first about the Paid Sick Leave Act. So if you have a full or part-time employee who needs to take time off for isolation, and quarantine due to a diagnosis of COVID, number one. Number two, doctor visits if they have COVID symptoms. Number three, orders to stay at home as a result of concerns over public health or concerns over health in the workplace. So those are the first three. The second three are, number four, care for family isolating with symptoms. So these are people that are under either mandatory quarantines or they have symptoms of COVID. That's number four. Number five is care for family members that are ordered to stay home by virtue of some governmental edict or requirement. And sixth and last is child care because school or daycare is closed and no babysitter is available. So I isolated those six different issues. The first three is isolation due to diagnosis, doctor visits, or orders to stay at home, require the employer to pay regular full-time pay to those employees for that 14-day period. The last three I spoke of, the care piece, care for family isolating or with symptoms, care for family members ordered to stay home, or child care because schools or daycares are closed, is 2/3 pay. So what is an employer to do if faced with this? Well, number one, you have to pay this. There's no way to avoid it. But the good news is that employers get a Social Security tax credit, dollar for dollar, with certain caps for making these payments. So to the extent that you can demonstrate you've made these payments to your employees, you get a dollar for dollar credit with a cap of $500 per day for events 1, 2, and 3 that we described, and $200 a day for the care piece, that's events 4, 5, and 6. And so this gives it's an absolute requirement to provide those 14 days of paid time off. You cannot require that an employee try to find someone to take up their job or find somebody to replace them. That is absolutely against the law. So let's talk about the second piece, and this really deals in some regards more with what Donna was describing. This is an expansion of the Family and Medical Leave Act. It picks up after that 14-day time period that I described. It too is effective through the end of the year unless it's extended. So it picks up after that 14-day period that's covered by the Sick Leave Act that I just described. This gives employees 10 weeks of paid leave. So they get the first, so it's a total 12-week program. The first 2 weeks would be covered by the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act, and then the next 10 weeks would be covered through this expansion of the Family and Medical Leave Act. Once again, it applies to small businesses, that is to say employers with less than 500 employees. I'm not going to get into the exceptions with regard to under 50 employees in a company. Not going to go there. That requires a lot more analysis. Just let me give you the 3 triggers for coverage and a requirement to pay under this act. The first is an order that the employee stay home and under circumstance where the employee cannot remote work. That's circumstance number 1. Circumstance number 2 is care for family members ordered to stay home. And circumstance number 3 is child care where school or daycare is closed and there is no babysitter. So we all are familiar. There's been news just in the last couple of days here in Jacksonville with large groups of kids that have been ordered to stay home because they were exposed, or some of them have tested positive. One unfortunate circumstance involving a school here in town was a party that parents had for a group of 6th or 8th graders, and unfortunately some of the kids tested positive, and a group of about almost 90 kids were quarantined. So let's take that in context of this act. So this act would suggest that child care that would be required because those kids are ordered to stay home and the school to them is closed, and where there is no babysitter that can be could be used, would require that employers pick up the responsibility for the payment of those employees. And by the way, all of this piece is at 2/3 pay rather than full pay. But the employers are required to pick up the pay for those people for as much as 10 weeks. So 2 weeks under the Sick Leave Act and 10 weeks under the expansion of family and medical leave. Like the other act, the employer can be reimbursed under the same mechanism. That is to say, Social Security taxes can be reduced dollar for dollar for the payment of these expenses, with the exception of, or with the limitations that there is a limit of $200 per day or $10,000 per quarter. And so those requirements, if you meet them, it gives you a mechanism to repay the obligation. And I know this is very difficult on small businesses, and I have some resources that are available to you through my law firm. We have a whole section in our website that is devoted to COVID-19 issues. The one relating to these acts that I've just described for you is on our website, and it's entitled Proposed New U.S. Employment Laws Amid Coronavirus, Good News for Employees, Not Exactly Ideal for Small Businesses, and that's certainly true. Our firm's website is adamsandreese.com. There's no charge for any of this. It's on the website. There's a separate section that is completely devoted to COVID-19. If that proves to be any kind of a problem for you, then my email address is tim.volpe@arlaw.com. And if you drop me an email, I'll send you a copy of the article, which will give you a lot more detail than I've been able to go over here today. With that scintillating discussion of the law, I'm going to turn it over to Gail.
Thank you, Tim. Good afternoon. So again, I'm Gail Perez, HR for TECO, Tampa Electric and Peoples Gas. And, you know, we've talked about the number of challenges that COVID has, you know, it's disrupted the work-life balance. And we complained about work-life balance before, so can we imagine how much is disrupted at this point? Parents are facing unprecedented challenges at the moment, and we know that. And so we've taken a number of actions that I'd like to share with you. And Donna, in listening to you earlier, we are aligned on some of those things, so I'm glad to know that. But I want to discuss with you some of the actions that we've taken at TECO. So we are currently allowing 65 to 70% of our team members to work from home. And these employees were in the office previously or on a site. And so, you know, that takes us, you know, ramping up our technology and a whole host of things that actually happened in about a week. I was just thoroughly impressed with how quickly we turned. And we got these employees up to speed. We got them working from home, and it's really been successful. We've already communicated to our employees that, look, we're going to be doing this at least through the end of the year. We understand that some schools may talk about reopening and all, but not all people, not all families feel comfortable with that. And so we have already made the determination and communicated that we're going to stay at home, working from home through the end of the year, and we'll reevaluate thereafter to determine how we proceed. We have also taken care of all COVID-related healthcare costs. So whether it's testing, whether it's they're not feeling well and they need to be out, whether it's hospital expenses, TECO is taking care of all COVID-related healthcare costs for our employees. We have also crafted a work from home policy when a person is out of state. We were getting several requests to work out of state, whether it's to take care of a family member, whether it's you know what, I have a lot going on with children in the home. I need the support in the home. And so I have a cousin or some support outside the state. Is it okay if I work from a different state? And we have allowed those opportunities as well. We are also, we have some case-by-case basis that we've looked at, and we've had to make some determinations. For instance, we have a single mother with 4 children that was working from home. Probably 85% of her position was on the phone, and she could not be effective in trying to balance the children as well as the work. And so what we did in that situation is we found opportunities where she can do work that doesn't require her to be on the phone until she can find some additional support. And so that worked for some time. Then she did find additional support. She's now able to work half-time on the phone, and the other half of the time she does need to be off of the phone. And so we have just made that schedule for her flexible to be able to accommodate her need and her situation. So we've had several situations such as that where we've had to take a look at the situation, and we just, you know, do what we can to accommodate that. We also understand mental health can really be an issue at this time. And so we have offered, you know, a number of services relative to mental health and recommendations and resources. We really have focus on mental health as well as your health and safety. We have virtual workouts. We have virtual meditation sessions and sites that we've created. We have a share site where employees are sharing recipes. Employees are sharing ideas on how to deal with and keep children occupied during these times, how to maximize your family time. So employees are sharing this, they're sharing information, and we're also sharing professional resources. We've also, we understand that we had to promote open communication because we have to check in on our employees. We do frequent check-ins to see how they're doing. So our performance coaches do normally weekly check-ins, checking on their employees, asking, how are you doing? How are you coping? Is there anything that you need? You know, what can we do to support you? And we'll go out and try to provide any type of resources or recommendations that we can to help those employees during this time. We've allowed for flexible work schedules. So maybe an employee may start a little later or maybe take a break during the day and get on at night and start to work at night. So we've allowed that flexibility. And we've also really encouraged socializing virtually. I've been to a couple of our happy hours. We call it our virtual happy hours, and everyone has their favorite drink and the rule is you cannot talk about work. And so, you know, sometimes there's a topic or they'll bring up something that we're going to focus on to keep the conversation going, but it is so important. And we've received such great feedback on the socializing and staying apart and connected to your teams and just getting away from it all for a little while. And then the final thing that I want to stress is the encouragement of employees using their time off. So our employees, you know, when you're normally taking a vacation, you're going out of town, you're taking a trip. Well, what we were recognizing is that since employees weren't able to take those trips that they're used to taking, they weren't taking any time off. And we truly encourage, look, you got to step away from work sometimes. You got to, take your time off. And we encourage our employees to use that and offer up other ways that maybe they can vacation without it being a trip to another country. So those are just a few things that we've done. We've had healthcare challenge, healthy lifestyle challenges where we're very competitive, I will tell you. And so it's, who's running the most, who's cycling the most, and that sort of thing. So it's been really, that's been highly encouraged and very much participated in. And also the meditation. I've not meditated before. I will say personally, this was my first time trying it, and they have the kind of beginners and they work your way up, and it's just amazing how much that can help. And so again, Tempo Electric, I think that we've gone above and beyond in really trying to do what we can to support our working families. And we encourage them, if your situation may not be the same as someone else's, please come talk to us and let's see what we can do to accommodate you, because I'm sure we have enough work, right? So I'm sure that we can accommodate your need. So thank you.
Thank you, Gail, and thanks to Donna and Tim as well. I really appreciate that, and that's great information. We've got some questions coming in. Here's one that I think is probably for Gail and Donna, but so you talked, Gail, a lot about flexibility, things that you guys have done for employees. If you've created that, but there are some employees that might be hesitant to take advantage of that because of a stigma that might be, the stigma of asking for help, right? Or not being able to, thinking that they're going to be thought of less because they're not able to get everything done at the same time. How do you encourage employees to take advantage of this?
I'll start, and then maybe Donna, if you have other recommendations. I would say one of the big pieces is to let our employees and help them understand what resources are out there and what we're doing to try to help. So if they know that the resources are there, they're maybe willing to come forward. And the second, it's that relationship with their performance coach or that peer employee that steps up and speaks out. That relationship, and I will tell you, when our performance coaches reached out to the employees and said, hey, let's talk about how you're doing. How are you handling, this? And it's that open and honest dialogue. And also, you can, as a performance coach or a supervisor leader, there's clues, there's signs that you sometimes see with your employees. They're more stressful on a call. They're more quiet than usual. I say look for those cues so that you can reach out to them and try to find out what's going on and assist them. So that's my recommendation.
I think those are great, Gail. And I think everything you talked about that TECO does is like, okay, I want to go, I'm going to call you, okay? I'm going to come, I need a job at TECO because everything you're doing. But just to add one thing about what you were saying, we see this a lot. Every week, people will talk about their inability to take the next step, their fear of not measuring up, their concerns about living in chaos. And sometimes it's hard to speak about that to your manager, right? Or your peers. You don't want to. So what we try to do is create these conversations with other people where you can learn. When you start to hear that you're not alone, we all think we're alone, it's only happening to us. And so the more you can hear that that's not the case, then it encourages people to take advantage of the resources that you are and a lot of companies are wisely providing.
Very good point.
Great. And Donna, in terms of how COVID is affecting women in the workforce, how does this compare to the financial crisis that we saw about 10 years ago? Are there any parallels? Or are there any main differences that you see for women in the workforce?
Well, the parallel has to do with when there is a financial hit that's significant, which is what we're starting to see now, the ability to recover takes quite a long time. And there is a parallel. I've read some articles about the parallel between now and then. And that's why they're talking about the pandemic being of generational impact, because when women step out of the workforce to take care of kids, and I'm not sure if you're seeing this, Gail or Tim, certainly in the legal field, there's a lot about women and being in law firms and the time it takes and all of that. To get back in is difficult. And the longer you stay out, the harder it is to get back in. So I think those are two parallels to the financial crisis back in 2018. I'm not sure if you're seeing any of that, Tim.
We are, and we're trying our best, at least in our firm. I think most of the legal profession is likewise trying their best to deal with that, both with regard to time off, paid time off for parents, both the mom and the dad, whomever it may be, paid time off for the folks that are enduring new childbirth, and also giving credit in evaluating, because as we've talked about before, Donna, we work on the billable hour in law firms, and we give credit for the time off as if the person had remained. We reduce any obligation or budget that they have for that timekeeping responsibility of the firm, so that they're not perceived as being behind any of their peers by virtue of making the decision to have a child and to take the time that is provided to them. So I think that's, I can't say that that's uniform, but I would say that's the majority rule.
Okay. Tim, there was one question about the paid time off, and actually two questions related to the same thing about the schools. So it was mentioned if the schools are closed or daycares are closed, then there's the paid time off, to some degree available to the parents. Do the schools have to be closed, or is that if parents aren't comfortable sending their kids to school? Do you know?
The way that the bill the act is phrased, it would require either school closure, daycare closure, in the absence of a babysitter to take care of the child, I would argue. And so under those circumstances, I would say if it's a voluntary act on the part of the mom or dad of the child to withhold the child from school because of their concerns about COVID, that could be problematic for the employee. If that's the decision made by the employee, then I'm not certain that they would qualify for the benefit that's available to them under the act. So complex, here's my favorite line, it depends, but it's a complex decision-making process, I think, on the part of everyone, because even if you're not technically covered, I think an employer should think long and hard about whether or not to provide some coverage to that employee, because it would not only be the right thing to do in most instances, but it also might, it also could be determined to be within the ambit of the coverage required under the act, under one or the other of the two acts. So I would not say that it would be required, but I think somebody should give a real hard look at what the circumstances are if the parent has legitimate concerns about the safety of sending their child to school.
Okay. And Gail, what of the options that you guys have provided, in the kind of the flexibility that you've given to employees, is there one program or one option that seems to be the most popular among your employees? You'd mentioned meditation. I'm not sure if that's on the list or not.
That's not on the list, I'll tell you that. But I will say, I think the sharing of ideas around how to keep your children engaged and sharing recipes and the socializing happy hour, that's very popular with our group. I think they really need to just be able to get out of the mom, dad space or workspace and just kind of let go. But also I will tell you that allowing our employees to work from home has been a hit. That's the all-time hit. We've done several surveys to gauge how employees are doing, how they're feeling about a lot of the actions that we've taken, a lot of the communications, and consistently, probably 85 to 90% of the comments are, will you continue to allow us to work from home once we're back to the new norm? Because we've now proven that we can do our work effectively at home. And so I think that's going to be our next decision that we'll need to make. But it's that flexibility, I think, that they appreciate more than anything else.
And what this is kind of for everyone. I know it's something that we're facing at the chamber. I'm sure a lot of other employers are too. And one of the things that we think is a good benefit that we provide is the opportunity for professional development. Whether it's conferences or courses and things like that. And a lot of that is not available right now. How do you continue to get your employees to continue to grow and give them opportunities to learn and to network and grow like that?
I can talk about a few things that we've done. We have a program. It's called Leading PGS. It's for what we call our high potential group, and they meet probably 4 times a year, and through for a couple of days for development purposes. And all of those programs are now conducted virtually. There's just so many tools with that you can use virtually. Now, is it the same as an in-person developmental session? No, it's a little different, but we continue to look for those developmental opportunities. And all these things are now not done in a normal, regular classroom, but they're done virtually for, mentoring our employees, training courses. There's just webinars. I mean, we're using every virtual tool at the moment to continue that development.
Matt, I don't know if that was kind of a softball for me, but for those who don't know, Generation W, one of our signature events is coming up on September 11th. It is a thought leadership event. It's been hosted in Jacksonville. Clearly now we have 1,300 people come every year from across the country. This year we're going virtual, Gail. So it's funny, as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking it is about personal development. It's about professional development. Allows for companies to engage in a meaningful way with community and with their employees to do the same. The fact that we're virtual this year, we are now expecting people from all over the world. And so we would, and companies, this is a great time when people need more than ever connection, inspiration, the building of community, the opportunity to learn, all those things. That's the work we do. And not only do we do it in this community level, corporate stage, but we also do it for teen girls. And we're finding that also is very successful, both working with companies and school districts, because the social emotional learning piece that we talk about for kids that is missing in virtual learning, it's something that we know how to deliver in our programming. It's the same thing that we deliver in our Generation W. So I'd love to invite anyone who's listening at any point before September 11th to join Generation W. It is absolutely personal and professional development. It is all about, it's called Vision 2020. It's about how we see the world and the things we don't see in the world, and how looking through other people's lenses really can help us understand the world in a more equitable way. So I offer that. Thank you, Matt, for asking that question.
Yeah, of course. And, how have you guys really adjusted what your programming and messaging is going virtual, and obviously going with everything that's going on right now? Have you made a lot of adjustments in terms of the content?
It's so interesting that originally we were focusing this year on this theme. It was about AI, which I think is really important. But in light of what's happening, we did make some changes. We're always about what's relevant and resonant. So yes, we will have an incredible keynote on race, delivered by a man who's considered the global conscience of sports, working in the race, working within race for 50 years. He's an amazing man. We have a lot of professional storytellers talking about their special lens. It's called Prism. So a lot of the things we had planned actually, with a little bit of tweak, are very relevant to where we are now, because we've always kind of tried to be on the edge of where people are. We didn't have anything planned for COVID, I will say that. That we did not see coming. But we always had something talking about, accepting challenge, right? And how do we do that? How do we look at change and wrap our arms around it and move with it in a way that's productive for us? So those kinds of things will be discussed at Gen W.
Yeah, I was going to say, Matt, for lawyers, we have a professional obligation for continuing education. And so we have shifted that within our firm, and I think, frankly, in the profession, virtual presentations entirely. The other thing that we've done that I encourage any employer to do is we've really stepped up our internal training processes. We had, as Gail suggested, this was a wholesale change, for example, in information technology, and we ramped that up. We actually offer every single day a variety of programs on information technology issues, as an example. so that people can gain greater proficiency in what they're doing. Because like Gail's experience, we found that our lawyers can function extremely well remotely. I think because we're lawyers and we like to talk, we miss the opportunity to be with one another and to collaborate and to
Yes.
form and to innovate. But as circumstances require, I think the opportunity to really expand your knowledge base, we've done that both from the perspective of putting that responsibility on the lawyers, individual lawyers' shoulders, and taking that responsibility as a firm to say we'll provide, if you need it, if you want it, we'll provide it.
That's awesome.
Okay. Well, and Gail, you mentioned working from home and how your team and your employees really appreciate it. And Tim, you mentioned billable hours, and I know Donna, you've mentioned this a little bit too. But so how do we? What do you do when there's employees that say they're having a difficult time separating their work environment from their home environment because it's they're the same place now? Do you guys have any tips for that?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. We deal with that quite a bit. I think part of it is it's hard to separate because it's so easy. Your computer's right there. It's 8 o'clock. I can check real quick to make sure. And then the other part, I think some of our employees maybe don't feel very secure with, I gotta let them know that I'm still working. I'm at home, but they have to know that I'm still being effective, and I gotta show. And so I think that a part of that, again, and I put a lot on what we call performance coaches and our leaders, because it's really, up to them to reach out to the employee to say, hey, I'm getting emails from you at 8 o'clock at night. I'm getting, it's not urgent. I'm encouraging you. I need you to stop doing that, and just following up with them to let them know that, it's not that, I know that you're doing what you need to do. You're being productive, encouraging them. And also, you have to give them the praise, and you have to, reward them for the work that they're doing so that they understand, I don't need you online at 8 o'clock at night. I need you taking care of your family. I need you to really focus on your work-life balance. So it's that same discussion. We talk about the open dialogue. It's that same discussion of talking to your employees, understanding what they're feeling and why they feel the need to do that, and encouraging them to not do that.
Well, I'm going to say one thing in response to that. Gail has prompted it in my mind, and that is one size does not fit all. We've had some people that frankly could not work from home. And to the extent that the building was open and they could do so, we told them, all right, assuming you have social distancing and you're wearing a mask, we actually take everyone's temperature on their way in the morning and ask them if they're ill and that kind of thing. But if you want to be present, because you cannot segregate work life from home life when you're home, we've given people that opportunity too. And we've probably had at least 10% of our workforce that have said, we can't do it. The kids, the situation, we just can't do it. We prefer to work from home, or to work from the office rather. And we've permitted that. We're able to do so. And so that's another reality of what's going on. So something to think about.
Yeah, we've
Great
done that.
point.
We've done that as well, Tim. We've done that as well. Matter of fact, I think I'm going to give myself permission to go to our office too. I think I need to do that.
Very good point, Tim. Yeah, we have those circumstances as well. And we just make sure that, the workplace is sanitized, they have the necessary, equipment and sanitizers and gloves and masks, etc. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
And how do you work with employees that feel just kind of disengaged and not, part of a team as they used to be? Some are in the office and some are not. And, a lot of times I think that when you talk about, Tim, with, one size doesn't fit all, you got some people that do a lot of work between 5 and 7 in the morning. I've got people on my team that I send emails at 9 and 10 at night. And that's just, everyone's different, and you can kind of, you fit it in when you can. But how do you make sure that employees stay engaged and stay part of the team during this time?
I think it's a tremendous challenge, to be honest with you. As everybody on this panel has noted, we're all going virtual and we're all missing those opportunities for interaction, many of the opportunities that we had before. An example, this month would normally have been our mid-year retreat, and we were going to the Grove Park Inn in North Carolina. It was all going to be lovely, and we'd be there for 3 days and be able to interact and meet with one another, and that's all, of course, now not going to happen, and we're going virtual. So I think it's a tremendous challenge to get that. I feel it, maybe just because I'm a lawyer, I don't know, but I feel it intensely. I feel like sometimes I have to have that one-to-one interaction to really make the communication work as well as it should. And candidly, I'm thrown off by the masks because I can't tell if someone's grimacing or smiling. I just, it's after 40 years of doing this and trying to not just, I don't want to say read people, but attempting to understand them from a body language and facial expression perspective, both for good or for bad, and trying to ascertain as a lawyer if someone's not telling the truth, as an example. It's all thrown off by where we are. And so I don't have a good solution for that myself. I feel like I'm thirsting for the personal interaction as much as possible.
Yeah, totally get that. Totally agree with that as well.
Yeah, I think it is a difficult task. I do believe that, you know, the cameras help a lot. And having those social moments that when you're not working and employees can just kind of let their hair down and be themselves is important. But I will tell you, it was a challenge for me because there's a lot of people here I've not met in person. I just started in March. I was in the office for a week and a half, and then I'm at home, right? And so, you know, having the ability to meet the way that we are and be able to talk and discuss the way that we are, it is very helpful. And I think that we have to understand what our employees are challenged with. Because if you understand what they're challenged with, then you understand what they need to become more engaged.
Sure.
And so if they have that support, I think that would also help. So that would be my recommendation.
Makes sense.
And this is a question, it's more of an advice question. So I'll start with you, Donna, and then if anyone wants to kind of jump in, feel free. This is from an employee who says they're working from home and they feel it's going great. They know eventually their employer is going to ask them to come back in. They would like to be able to continue to work from home, but are afraid that their employer might think that they're not going to be working as hard. And they're trying to figure out how and when to have that conversation with their employer. Just,
Well,
do you have any suggestions?
I mean, listen, I think all of us run businesses. Gail's running a significantly large HR department for a big company. But these are the kind of questions we get actually every week. And I think it's interesting. The person, first of all, feels like their request would not be received well. Right? So is that about the culture of the company? Are they expecting that this is a company that is not going to be as flexible moving forward, which is interesting in and of itself? I think what employers want, what we all want, are employees who are committed, who are productive, and who want to do what they can as much as they can to contribute to the company. And so, you know, my recommendation would be to put together a little sheet that shows all of those things, that shows how productive they've been able to be, the kind of progress they've been able to make on their assignments, what the value they've been delivering in the company, and showing that they can do that from home, because that would be a good baseline to have that conversation.
Yes, I agree. I like that approach, Donna. I believe that, you know, organizations, this is something that organizations need to think about as a whole. And I think that many organizations are. I know culturally it may not, you know, work in some organizations versus others, but I think it's a good question to ask. And I think you may be able to even, and I'm not sure how large the organization is, but ask it in totality. Is the organization considering a different type of work arrangement now that we've been working from home effectively? Yeah, and so maybe if it's not tied to your position specifically, but if there are other people that are other employees that are in some similar situation, then maybe it's is this something that we're looking at from, or that you're looking at from an organizational standpoint? But if it's specific to you, then I would agree with Donna's approach of, here's what I'm doing. It's 100% virtual, and here's the successes that I've had with that. And is this something you would consider in the future? I think that's a very good approach.
There's
The
always
efficiency
a
approach,
hybrid,
too.
right? I'm sorry, Tim.
Oh, I was going to say, just consider also, for that person, consider also having an honest discussion with the employer about efficiency, because what we're contemplating as a law firm is a substantial reduction in the amount of office space that we take, because we believe that so many people will have a preference to work from a remote location, from their home or otherwise. And so that's something else for that person to consider in terms of their discussion with their employer, that it might be a less expensive alternative than providing space at a certain square foot price inside an office. And so just food for thought as you approach your boss.
I can share this with you. We did a poll last week and asked people, would you like to return full time? Would you like to work from home, or would you like a hybrid approach? We had over 100 people from around the region and beyond. And interestingly enough, 26% said they wanted to return full time. So a quarter of them. When you combine the quarter and the hybrid, it was almost 70%. And so that left 30% of this particular group that wanted to work strictly from home. So it's interesting. There is a culture question that a lot of companies are talking about. How do I maintain the culture of the organization that I have if not everyone is there? And I think that's a good question to ask, because we do need connection at some point. So what does hybrid look like? There's probably there's hybrid that's 4 and 1, hybrid 3 and 2, maybe 2 days a month. I mean, there's all these different iterations that companies do need to evaluate with that gets factored by the kind of work they do, right? With legal work versus an energy company versus a not-for-profit company, all of those things, the kind of roles everybody has, and who is the most productive how. So I think there's a lot of interesting questions coming up that we should, and conversations to determine that. I know there are companies, big time financial companies up in New York are dead set about getting everybody in their office. And I know there are some companies here that are doing the same, and yet I know others that are far more flexible. So I think it speaks to the culture and the leadership of companies as well.
I was going to say on culture, I think what we're discovering, or what we're sort of grappling with right now, is for new hires. So we will have a class of new lawyers, for example, coming into the law firm. And we think having them remote will have an adverse cultural effect, to use Donna's perspective on that. And so they will probably be urged to have more interaction, to the extent that we can do so inside the office, than older employees who are already established with the company and have already understand and are enmeshed in the culture. And so I think what's going to happen is there'll probably be more focus on incoming classes of new folks, new hires, to cause them to be at or near the headquarters or the office building or whatever the circumstance may be. And that may be more attenuated. It may be more flexible for workers that have already gone through that process and are fully acculturated to the company or to the firm.
And we're almost out. There's one more question that came in that I wanted to make sure that we got to, so we might go a minute or two over. But it was a good question about how do you think how employers are dealing with their employees during this crisis will affect what employers are looking for, or what employees are looking for in their next job, from their next employer.
I'll start with that. I think that it's critical to how employers, or how job seekers will look at companies in the future. How they reacted to COVID, how they treated their employees during this time. I think it's going to be critical. It's important that job seekers understand that in times of a pandemic or, hardships, that the employer will be there and the employer will do whatever they can to support them as an employee. So in my opinion, I think it's critical.
I agree, 100%. I think it's going to be looked at as a competitive disadvantage if you were an employer who during this period of time had to let a lot of people go, otherwise cut salaries, reduce benefits and things of that sort. It'll be a hallmark of stability and a competitive advantage if you did not do that, if you treated folks the way they need to be treated.
Okay. Well, great. We've reached 3 o'clock. I don't know if there's anything else that any of our panelists would like to add. If there's any closing shots that you'd like to say, anything that you wanted to leave with our audience?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Timothy, yeah, I learned a lot. Thanks so much, you guys.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Great. And I
Thank
want
you.
to remind everyone that we have a series of these webinars every Tuesday at 2 o'clock for the next 3 to 4 weeks. We'll be looking next week at how employers should react if there's a positive case in their office. We have other HR and looks at commercial real estate and cybersecurity that are coming up in the next coming weeks. So again, thank you, Donna Orender, Tim Volpe, and Gail Perez. We really appreciate your time and thanks for joining us.
Bye, thanks.
Bye-bye. Thank you.